Okay, on to Module 3, talking about parenting styles. And so, as you may well know, every parent seems to have a different style of interacting with their children, and somebody came along and classified them. So, let's go ahead and look in that in a little more detail. So, when we talk about parenting styles, what we're talking about is the kind of practices that parents exhibit in relation to children and the effects of these practices might have on them. Now, if you remember back to our cultural beliefs chapter, I believe it was chapter 4, we talked about custom complexes, and this would be a custom complex that reflects an underlying cultural belief. And the way that we parent goes to the heart of a lot of that kind of custom complex. Now, parenting's been described to have two dimensions, and this is the work by Diane Baumrind. And one of those dimensions is the issue of demandingness. And this is the degree amount of control to which parents set down rules and expectations for behavior and require their children to comply with them. Okay, so dimensions, by the way, when we talk about dimensions, this means that everybody has these particular areas, but they may have a lot of one or almost none of one or somewhere in between, but you got something in that kind of continuum. That's when we talk about a dimension, that's what they're referring to. And so you have the demandingness dimension, and then you have the responsiveness or the amount of warmth dimension. And so this is the degree to which parents are sensitive to their children's needs and the extent to which they express love, warmth, and concern for their children. Now, these two dimensions are going to combine into 4 different types of parenting styles, which we're going to go over here. So here is the dimensions: high demandingness, low demandingness, high responsiveness, low responsiveness. And on each one, we're going to go ahead and have a parenting style. So the first one is the authoritarian parenting style. Now, the authoritarian parenting style occurs in roughly about 19% of all parents, and they require pretty strict obedience from children. They punish disobedience without compromise, and they expect commands to be followed without dispute or dissent. I kind of nicknamed this one the my way or the highway kind of approach. Now, not to be confused because the names are so similar: authoritarian, authoritative, but the authoritative, which about 35% of parents follow, set clear rules and expectations for children. They make clear what the consequences will be if children do not comply and make those consequences stick if necessary. They also explain the reasons for rules and expectations for children, and they're willingly engaged in discussion over issues of discipline. So it's not all or nothing. I am the high, authority and everything. They're willing to listen to the children about their opinions. And then what this approach does is it promotes autonomy in a very positive way with the authoritative approach. They encourage discussions, give and take, and it teaches adolescents to think independently and make more mature decisions. So in case you guessed it, authoritative parenting tends to be the one that has the most positive results over and across cultures. Disengaged, what we see with the disengaged parents, and about a third of parents fit in here, the goal is really to minimize the amount of time and emotion they have to devote to parenting. The absence of any restraint that allows adolescents really a great deal of autonomy without parental guidance. It's kind of like, I got you this far, kid. Now you can take it on your own. But saying that much, much earlier than probably is healthy. And then finally is permissive. And we get this in about 11% of parenting of adolescents. And in this case, there are few kind of clear expectation for the children's behavior, and they rarely discipline them in a permissive family. The emphasis is really on responsiveness to the adolescent's needs and the absence of restraint that allows adolescents more autonomy. So just the disengaged and permissive give tons of autonomy, but very little supervision. Authoritative gives you some autonomy, but also has, these kind of restrictions. And so it's like they give you some power to be on your own, but it's not an unfettered power, which is, we'll find out in the results, which we'll talk about in the next module, is not necessarily a good thing. So Here's how parents might sound with particular types of um, parenting approaches. So, with authoritarian, do it my way because I said so. Don't argue with me. It's my house, my rules. These are very authoritarian kind of statements. Now, the authoritative is no, you can't go to the mall today. You know, the mall family made plans to see your sick aunt. How about we drop you off at your friend's house on the way home? Good enough compromise. So they listened to the adolescent, but they didn't give in necessarily. Okay. Disengaged, mom, are you home? I guess I'm in charge of dinner again. So they're totally on their own. And then a permissive parent, sure, you can have a party in the house while we're away. The keys in the liquor cabinet, to the liquor cabinets in your father's sock drawer. As you can see, very responsive to their needs, probably not in the most healthy way, though I'm sure the adolescent at the time would be thrilled. So here are the American parenting styles in adolescence. I should say, if we went back into childhood, the disengaged would be much lower, as you might imagine, because they can't even, children can't even do a facsimile of being independent. Certainly 13, 14-year-olds can to a degree. But, authoritative parenting was somewhat more common in middle class families and white families. And authoritarian parenting tends to be more common in minority families. And sometimes I've seen literature where they've split the difference between authoritarian and authoritative, called no nonsense parenting. And you see this particularly in families from Asian descent and African American. And they are associated, as we'll be talking about in the next module, with about the same level of positive outcomes. So if you're going to go any way with an authoritative approach, but not a pure authoritative, it's okay to lean a little bit more into the authoritarian. Where you really get kind of the poor outcomes is in the disengaged and permissive. And the reason we see so many high in disengaged is, of course, adolescents are pushing, right? They want this freedom, and a lot of parents have just had it by then. They are done, they're ready to get back to their own lives, and they just kind of disengage in that way. So, something to kind of think about beyond what my explanation is why disengaged parenting style is so high in adolescence, because obviously adolescents still need a helping hand. They need their parents' guidance, but at the same time, there is these other issues going on. So while you ponder that, we will wrap up this module, and then we're going in module 4 to discuss the effects of these parenting styles on adolescence overall. So be thinking about that disengagement, and then click on over onto module 4.